Hello, welcome back to another video. This is a recent read. I'm gonna talk about two books in this video. But before I talk about books, just a little bit of you know how things are going with my life so far. Actually, I have been recording some videos these few days, but I deleted those videos because of a few reasons. Basically, things just didn't go well or smoothly for those videos, so they're not, they no longer exist, so you won't be seeing those videos. They're lost forever, okay, which is a good thing because those videos kind of sucked. Basically what happened was, the first video that I recorded, I made a mistake and I didn't realize this mistake at the time. So basically, when I was recording this first video, I was actually leaning my phone on my laptop, which was on at the time, and I wasn't aware of the fact that when I turn on my laptop, of course the laptop fan is going to be on as well. And as a user, as a human user, I am not aware that the laptop fan I'm not aware of the fact that the laptop fan would have such an impact on my video recording, especially if I were to put my phone right on top of the keyboard of the laptop. So basically what happened was that the video pretty much picked up all the sounds from the fan, which, as a regular laptop user, was not something that I would be very aware of, whenever I use my laptop. Like, it's not very loud, but the phone picked it up. And so when I wanted to process that video, it just had this weird whirring sound in the background. It was so annoying. So annoying. So I decided to delete that video. And then I re-record the video, and I think the second thing that happened was related to the storage issue. So basically, I was recording, and it did give me a notification that the storage space was approaching its minimum. And so I just turned off the notification, because usually there would be some some extra kind of allowance for me to record few more minutes. But the problem was that I was totally in the zone while I was recording. I was very much invested in whatever I was saying, and I didn't realize that my phone just stopped recording by itself. And by the time I realized that the stop recording button was no longer the stop recording button, but it was just the round record button, which meant that it just stopped recording some time ago, I was deeply incensed by what happened. And so I just didn't have the mood to record at the time. But then I decided to hold myself together, and I deleted that video because I was annoyed. I suppose I could salvage some bits, but I was annoyed, so I deleted that video. It was an emotional decision, okay, relatable stuff. So I decided to record again, and the second time I recorded that video after the whole stop recording by itself incident, I was able to record a full video, which was great. It was nice. But then I decided to delete that video because overall the whole experience has been really emotionally taxing, and I just didn't feel good about that last video. Even though technically no technical issues happened with that video, so I just deleted it. It just didn't have that vibe. You know what I'm saying? It just had that annoyed vibe all over, even though I was smiling and stuff. But yeah, I decided that I didn't want to give that to you guys, so I decided to do this one This is I hope, a more proper video for you. And I want to talk about these two books here. So first, I'll be talking about this one. This is Our Spoons Came from Woolworths by Barbara Comyns. This book was published in 1950, I think, and it has been something that I've wanted to read for quite a while now. I read a few pages of it some time ago, and I thought it was really interesting. And this book was something that I bought for myself right after I submitted my final thesis draft, and so I was feeling quite happy with myself, and so I decided to do a little bit of celebration, and so I got this book. And the reading experience of this book turned out to be a great one. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. So, okay, what is this book about? This book is set in, I believe it's 1930s Britain, and it centers around this young woman named Sophia. I think she's somewhere in her early 20s or so, and she's getting married to a young artist named Charles. But the thing is that both of these young people, they are really poor. They don't have a high-paying job, and they decide to get married. And so they eventually get married. But the first kind of like the first few months of their marriage, things were just kind of okay for them, because I suppose they were still in this honeymoon period, and so the poverty doesn't really affect them so much. But eventually Sophia starts to feel the impact that poverty has on their married life, and things just get much worse after Sophia gets pregnant and she gives birth to the baby. And the story pretty much just continues from there. And the entire book is literally about the life of Sophia and her husband, and basically her family, including her kids, how she handles living in poverty, and what kind of choices that she and her husband decide in the face of poverty, basically, and how it affects them physically, how it affects them mentally and emotionally. And we would eventually see how Sophia, the main character, ends up in situations that are just kind of unpleasant. Okay, kind of. Situations that are unpleasant because of this poverty that they are facing. The book, the story is narrated by Sophia, the main character. So we have this first person narrator narrating the story to us. And there's a bit of a framing that I find kind of interesting. It's a very minor thing. Basically, the story is narrated from the point of view of a person who has gone through the things in this book, and it appears as if like this person, this narrator, is kind of like looking back at their life, and pretty much telling the story of what happened when she was like around 20, in her 20s. And it reminds me of one thing. The structure of this book reminds me of something. If you are familiar with those short videos on YouTube, or reels on Instagram, or TikTok, apparently it has been banned in the US. Maybe you would have come across a certain kind of short video format in which the ending of the short clip is connected seamlessly to the beginning of the clip, especially if you let the clip play, let it repeat, play in a loop, and sometimes creators would make the clip such that the ending blends with the beginning, and that's how it feels with this book. Basically, when I got to the ending, at first the beginning felt kind of like disconnected from what I read in subsequent chapters, like the beginning of the first chapter. But when I got to the ending of this book, somehow there's something like it seems like it segues really nicely back, circles back into the beginning of this book, and it feels like, the first chapter of this book could very well become like the first chapter after the last chapter of this book, which I think is kind of interesting. Anyway, that's just kind of like one small stuff that I find interesting. The big thing that I find interesting also in this book is that the voice of the narrator is kind of offbeat somewhat. So reading this book and looking at the story from the point of view of a distant reader, one can acknowledge that whatever happens in this book can be kind of unpleasant, but at the same time, the tone that the narrator uses in telling the story can be kind of flippant and can be kind of unserious, a little bit irreverent at certain places as well. Like, it kind of makes you wonder, oh, okay, I thought the matter that we're discussing is kind of grave, but how come the narrator just speaks like, speaks so lightly of whatever that's going on in this book. And so there's a bit of that, in my opinion, there's a bit of that disconnect between how the narrator tells the story and what's really going on in this book, which I think makes it really interesting. It gives this book a really interesting voice. It makes it feel engaging, and it really grabs my attention and makes me want to read more and more. So I guess that's all I want to say about Our Spoons Came from Woolworths. It is just really interesting book, and I'm very much excited to try more of Barbara Comyns in the future, but I feel like it's going to be a little bit difficult because even this one is kind of difficult to find here in Malaysia. And I didn't see any other Barbara Comyns title on the shelf when I bought this, so yeah, who knows, maybe I'll get lucky in the future. But yeah, I am excited to read more by this author. So I'm going to talk about the second book. Let me catch my breath. Anyway, now moving on to this one. This is a science fiction novel. This is by Samuel R. Delany, and this is called Babel 17. And this one was actually a recommendation by a booktuber, Shannon from That Soap Ho, and I find that this book is just really interesting. That said, I eventually gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. So I am dying to talk about this book. Okay, maybe not that much, but so yeah, first, what is this book about? This book centers around this adventure conducted by the main character named Rydra Wong, and this book is set in sometime in some future time. I'm not exactly sure when exactly the date is, but basically the story is set somewhere in the future, and at the time there is a war going on, a space war between the faction called the Alliance and also the other faction called the Invaders. And Rydra Wong and basically the government that Rydra belongs to, they belong to this Alliance faction. So the Alliance faction is kind of like the good guys, and the Invaders are like so-called the bad guys. But that is going to be a bit of a tenuous claim as we read this book later. But anyway, I won't give too much about that. Anyway, what happens at the beginning of this book is that Rydra is approached by the military of her government because apparently there has been attacks by the invaders on the Alliance. And what connects these attacks together is the presence of some kind of recording or communication from these alien invaders. And the military just can't understand this communication. And so they approach Rydra, who used to work with the military before, and is also a poet herself who has great skills with languages. They approach her to, hopefully that she can consult them about this nature of this communication. And when Rydra studies this, these communications, these recordings, she realizes that it is a new language that she finds really intriguing. So what she decides to do is that, based on recording, she figures out when the next attack is going to be, and so she decides to go on an adventure to that next attack, where that next attack is going to be, so that she can hopefully meet the native speaker of this language, because she just finds this language to be so interesting. But during that adventure, something weird happens. And it's going to have something to do with this whole language business, okay? Now, let me just say that I find this book is interesting because it talks about languages. I myself am interested in languages. I like to learn languages. I find languages really fascinating, and so of course I would find a book that talks about languages really exciting and interesting. And indeed, this book does in fact include languages as its kind of like the core idea of its main plot and themes. Now, what made me sort of gave this one 3 out of 5 stars instead of like 4 or 5 is that this book for me seems to push forward the idea that language is something that can determine a person's thought processes or perception of reality, and it seems to be really confident with that idea. And in fact, that idea is basically the basis of some of the plot points in this book, including one of the biggest plot point in this book. And so I just felt like that idea is not something that I feel very convinced by, and I believe that in the linguistic circle also don't really believe in that idea. And I just felt that because I couldn't really feel convinced by that idea, which becomes the basis of a lot of things in this book, I find myself difficult to suspend disbelief in regards to how the plot and certain revelations unfold in this book. And so it just didn't really feel real. It didn't feel very solid to me in terms of how the plot moves forward, in terms of how a particular mystery in this book is revealed in it, at the end. It didn't feel like it was something surprising to me. It didn't feel like it was something that I could say, I could, say that I was on board with. So I didn't feel very convinced by the plot of this book, because I didn't feel convinced by the idea it was based on. So yeah, that's why that's kind of like the main flaw that I saw with this book. But at the same time, I could also see that there are certain parts that I did like. Like, first of all, I think that the form of this book is kind of interesting. It has it plays around with forms. It plays around with styles. You could you see like there are different formats in different chapters. This book is divided into 5 parts that are sort of varied in terms of length, and these 5 parts focuses on different characters in the book. And some parts in this book are also written kind of differently, with different styles and formatting, and I thought that was really interesting and made reading this book felt kind of exciting. And another thing is that I also kind of like the idea that this book, kind of like an adjacent idea that this book has concerning languages, which is like how language can be used as a weapon, which for me personally I feel is so true, especially in our world today. It is something that is definitely happening at the moment, although not the same way as how language is being used as a weapon in this book. But I do feel that in our real world, language is definitely something that is used as a weapon, as propaganda, for example. And also how language is, when it's not weaponized, it can also be used as a bridge to shorten the gap between people, which, common sense. And the fact that there's a war happening at the background of this story kind of highlights the fact that language really does play a role in, either kind of like sowing discord or connecting different groups of people together. And I find that idea to be, something that lend this book a certain sincerity and also passion. And this book has a heart. It has a particular emotional warmth that I personally appreciate. So those are my thoughts about Babel 17. Now, so these are the two books that I want to talk about in this video. Let me know if you have read any of these books. I am excited to hear what you think about these. Let me know what you're reading at this moment. I actually just finished one short story by Perkins Gilman, but I'll talk about that in the next video. The one that I finished was The Yellow Wallpaper, which is like a really famous story. I'm sure everyone knows that. And I'm also currently reading a bunch of others. I am getting back into some of the books that I sort of ditched temporarily, which includes Unknown Soldiers by Väinö, Linna. But I feel like that book is still difficult to read at this moment, and I'm not sure when that book is gonna be easier to read for me. Yeah, I don't think that book is gonna be easier to read, for these few months at least, because of the content and because of some I would say some emotional changes that I've been experiencing because it's just so depressing. I also resumed reading Down Among the Women by Weldon. Not sure how I feel about this one. My first Weldon was a success, but this one, I'm gonna give it some time. I'm gonna give it some time. So anyway, have you read these books? Let me know if you have any thoughts about these ones as well. So yeah, that's all for this video. I hope you guys are doing great, doing well, and I'll see you again in the next one. So until then, take care. Thanks for watching, and bye.